So, we're just going to talk. He's going to talk to us. If you have questions, he'll, I'm sure, allow you to answer anything. His partner is going to stream him live because his people are going to watch it down at his office. So,
great.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you for having me and inviting me, and I appreciate the opportunity. And so I'm here really to speak as a realtor, not in any great official capacity, although I'm going to reference a couple of those capacities. So for an overview, because I think we can cover any number of topics today that you'd like, I do have a very close relationship with the mayor. I mean, I have been involved in politics predominantly from the real estate perspective because I care about neighborhoods and their public safety and the schools and the sidewalks and what's been going on with them. So I was very involved. I was somewhat involved in the park administration, but I think historic preservation battles kind of got me a little alienated with some of that administration. So I consciously made an effort to be involved in the next selection of the mayor and had the opportunity to serve on Mayor Turner's executive transition team, 7 individuals, non-paid, who are the consultants to lead the direction for his administration. And we oversaw basically 15 initiatives for the mayor, totally encompassing. There were transition committees on the airport system, on Rebuild Houston, on TERS reform, the pension reform, quality of life, public health, public safety, criminal justice, totally encompassing or whatever. And those groups reported to the executive committee, which made recommendations to the mayor. And we continue to kind of serve in an advisory capacity in those endeavors for the mayor. I specifically co-chaired with Nancy Kinder quality of life issues, which is the consulting arm for the mayor on parks, arts, quality. versus a minor collector street, which might be Harvard, which feeds into Travis. And the width of that street, determined by the Planning Commission, we are planning 50 years out in the future. We're planning for the city of Houston's huge. Remember, it encompasses Montgomery County, it encompasses 34 county area or whatever. And so we're looking at undeveloped land, and when they replat, we get future roads that they must dedicate. So if they have a big span of property on Highway 6, and they're gonna put a subdivision in there, and they're taking 34 acres, well, when they replat, we will get dedicated road easements that will connect the subdivision to something else. Even though we don't have it yet in the property adjacent, we know 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, it will sell and we'll get the exact same easement. So it's very interesting that the Planning Commission is over major thoroughfares and minor collectors. So often when I'm looking at surveys, I need to see how big is the road. Is the road width 50 feet, 60 feet, 70 feet? Because it determines a lot of whether or not they're going to grant a variance, or a variance would be granted in the future, even in a subdivision like we just had one at the corner of Highland and Reagan. Depending on the width of the street determines whether or not we're probably going to grant a variance or not. We can't grant a variance that violates any deed restrictions. That's not really an option. If the deed restriction says the setback is 20 feet, then there's nothing that the Planning Commission can do that. But in general, if there's no deed restriction, there's still a building code, and it determines a normal setback. 10 feet in the front, 3 feet on the side, 3 feet on the back. You can get a variance to build into those build lines relatively easy. It's not a complicated deal. If there's no deed restriction, you want to build into the 3-foot build line, you want a variance to build either on the line or halfway across the line, and so long as there's a fire rated wall, the drainage dealing with the runoff from the roof is addressed, or whatever, you sure we're doing that. So we're granting these variances, which is a process, could easily be done. Here's one that catches us a lot. Let's say you're in Oak Forest, you've got the typical house that's got a carport in the front, and they want to tear down the 1950s metal carport and put up a nicer carport out of hardy plank with a little pitched roof now or whatever. Well, what happens all the time is they just tear down the one and they build the new one, and then the neighbor turns them in. The carport most likely violated some setback. They usually did. They were just kind of built there when they weren't enforced. Now you would need a variance to rebuild your carport into that area, whatever. Typically, how it's historically worked is if you ask for the variance, you're generally granted the variance, okay? But the people that illegally go and just do it, build without a permit, never got a permit, just do it, and it's halfway up or finished, and they come before the Planning Commission, generally speaking, it would be denied, and those people have to tear down that carport, maybe start over, or maybe never ever get a variance. If they just really violated the city rules for permitting, they're less likely to get a variance, unless there's some extreme financial hardship. People, most people know today you would need a permit to build a carport that would probably have some power or electricity to it at the same time. So it seems to catch us a lot. We've seen this year, we've had a few of those instances almost every other week. It's kind of interesting how it works. It's there again, I think it's easier to ask permission than it is to ask for forgiveness a lot of the time, but it's one of those issues that comes up a lot. Then, so we deal with major thoroughfares. A new one we're dealing with, the Planning Commission deals with changing street names. It's a hot topic, kind of like changing the name of schools from Confederate names to non-Confederate names. You'd be surprised how controversial this is. Dowling Street might be a prime example of one of those things where there's a big push to change the name to something. And so the process by which you change a name goes through the Planning Commission. If you want to change the name of the street, you go to the Planning Commission. We're in the process of changing the procedure. A block to be able, the 1500 block of Harvard, when Rover the dog dies, who's been there 20 years on that block, and if 75% of the people want to change the name to Rover Lane for that block, people were doing that sort of thing. You'd be surprised. And so the city made it a little cumbersome to change the name of a street, and it had to have title commitment done for all of the tracts that were impacted, whatever. So we're looking at some of those things, say it probably shouldn't be that cumbersome, but it's not that easy just to change a name on a whim or whatever. And the actual name changing comes with planning commission, then it goes to city council. Typically the council would approve whatever the planning commission approved, especially if it was unanimous, whatever. But that will be something that we're doing over the next 3 or 4 months. If you have any input on changing street names, be sure to let us know. Another thing about the planning commission is that in general, which is kind of interesting, they are more interested not necessarily in the level of support, but in the level of opposition. Okay, so we encourage the neighbors. People call me all the time, what can I do? Go and bitch at planning commission if you're against something, because they want to know if people are opposed. They don't have a great mechanism to determine how democracy works. Remember, about 11% of the people voted in the mayor's election. It wasn't 75%, it wasn't 50%. Very few people go and are actually in support of something. So from that mindset, they gauge the level of opposition. So if you have a minimum lot size application, a neighbor goes in and makes an application, and 30% of the people are in favor, and 70% of the people say nothing, generally that deal would pass. And you would think, I mean, I'm very liberal Democrat, you would think they should get to 55% or 60% or 70% in order to impose something as strict as minimum lot size. They don't have to. And what they're gauging is if no one vetted their planning commission, and that's where people would have the opportunity to say something. It's interesting, we just had the 20 block of Harvard made a minimum lot size application of basically 6,600, 50 by 132. We're required to look at the block face, which is the entire span from 20th Street on the corner to as far as you could go. There's no real 21st Street, so you go all the way to 22nd Street, and you apply to the east, west, north, or south. They made an application for both the east and the west, and they got about 40% of the people in favor of the deal. What I didn't realize, most people didn't realize when they go to make application, it's not in a historic district there. You have a predominantly single family houses. When you get minimum lot size, application approved, whatever the use of that property is now dictated forever, or it becomes single family residence. So the guy who was trying to buy the old Clayton Lee place right there at the corner of 20th and Harvard, the 2 tracks on 20th Street, both those kind of commercial buildings, one used to be the music thing and one was Clayton Lee's, and then the bungalow behind it, the very next house, into the block or whatever. Well, they wanted to tear down the bungalow, which they could do because they're not in a historic district, and put a parking lot. But when minimum lot application went into play, you could not, you can tear down the bungalow, but you can only build back a single family residence. You can't use that for a parking lot anymore. The land use is dictated by minimum lot size. You know, we don't have zoning, City of Houston, and that sale, which was $1.5 million, fell out over that deal. The law firm didn't feel like they could make it without parking in that bungalow space. So I didn't even realize that it dictates land use on the minimum lot size. We have a lot of them that come up. I mean, these days, minimum lot size is probably the largest thing we're doing. Most of Lindale and a lot of the near north side, I mean, you're getting 75 to 85% of those blocks and subdivisions who have gone in. Brooksmith and all the area around Monkey Beach, they're 85% have minimum lot size on those blocks already. And the city doesn't do great about identifying that for people, for you to know what's going on. We do have a website, the planning department website, but if you're in doubt also, you can always give me a call or email or text or something, and I can kind of verify it for you. It's always good to have someone that you can call. You'd be surprised. All of the upper Kirby area continually has these applications, but we have many times like on Lexington and some of those streets there where they haven't had very well, remember, there's a lot of townhouses already there. There's a lot of businesses already there. They don't necessarily want their property to have minimum lot size. So they do come and complain. And when they've only gotten to 30, 40, 50%, those applications have been denied because there's been a fair level of opposition. So it's certainly not automatic that you're going to get it, but I encourage people. I didn't realize how important it was to go and bitch, because you used to think, surely they have to get to some threshold. The threshold is very low for what it is that they have to get. So a lot of minimum lot size applications, not as many minimum build line applications as we used to have, but they pop up all the time. The people that just bought, I don't think it was any Coldwell Banker, certainly wasn't Boulevard Realty Deal. They bought the corner of 8.5 in Beverly and had a survey. Survey said that this setback was 15 feet. Just want to reemphasize, I think surveys are wrong a lot of the time, not a little bit of the time, a lot of the time they're wrong. We make people buy their own survey, make people rely, go back to that surveyor if it's wrong. Never rely on a seller giving a survey, because I'm telling you, they're wrong so many times. I see bad surveys at Planning Commission every week, I assure you. So it said 15-foot setback. They designed a house. They built the house. They built the first floor. The neighbors turned them in, of course, because there was a prevailing build line of 19 feet. They had to move that and had to take the house down and move it back 4 feet or whatever. They did come before the Planning Commission. They wanted a variance. We did not grant them the variance for that. We did grant them a variance because we're coming off an alley. The building code is, 15-foot alley. You need a 9-foot turning radius, so you have to have a 24-foot span. We granted them a variance for their garage when they would push back the house to try and compensate for the fact that they had to move back the house out of the build line. But I mean, it's rare that you would necessarily get a variance for a build line if there had been prevailing build line. That had been in place since 1998. That build line had been there. And all the other houses were at 19 feet. It's pretty hard to get a variance for that. But it's possible, but not probable. So minimum build line application also go to the Planning Commission. It's one of those things that we do. So that's kind of an overview of the Planning Commission. And I'll be happy to answer any questions about that. The main thing that started all this is that the Historic Preservation Ordinance was modified last October, and we're kind of just now seeing the results of the modification of the ordinance being changed. Part of that agreement was that we would get these design guidelines. So I'm not going to take up the historic preservation battle, but same thing. I want you to join my fraternity, and I'm not going to tell you the rules until after you join. And now it's been 6.5 years, and we don't have a manual yet that says what's acceptable or not in the Heights, but we're going to have them. It just appears like we're not really going to have them until next summer. And so the design guideline process has begun. About $225,000 the city is spending to create guidelines for all the historic districts that don't have them. The primary focus is on Heights East, West, and South. There'll be one set of design guidelines for those 3 districts, although there could be subsections if there's a predominant thing happening in Heights South that doesn't necessarily happen in Heights West. There could be some extrapolation that says that. The design guidelines will kind of determine, can't violate the ordinance, but it will determine some overwhelming characteristics of what should happen. The main thrust with the Historic Preservation Ordinance, when you get down to the nut and bolt of it, is always about scale and size. I mean, the rest of the stuff is relatively nebulous, in my opinion. It's about size. Okay? When the ordinance was modified, the biggest change was that what we'd been doing was buying a bungalow and starting at 50% and doing the camelback sort of thing. And the biggest change is that, in theory, you must start at 100% now. You might get a little bit if there was a porch that was enclosed in the 50s. You might could take off the porch and start a little sooner. But there's no more of these camelbacks that we had been doing for the previous 6 years. They're not going to get approved. So the guys that bought 424 Euclid over there, they bought a little bungalow on 50 by 100. The only thing they can get approved again is my old 510 Euclid that, who had it here. Same thing, you build a house all the way to the back of 3 feet, there's absolutely no yard. It's 3,800 square feet. How are we going to sell that house to a family in Woodland Heights when there's absolutely no yard? You're not going to be able to sell that house. I mean, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So, I mean, 3 times they submitted drawings and 3 times they were denied. They bought that house for $450,000. They spent $70,000 designing a house. They put it back on the market for $450,000. You can calculate with me. They've taken a $100,000 loss. If they had just come to anyone, me, I could have told them what they wanted was never going to get approved. I mean, it was never going to get approved. You're going to have to start at 100% before you can start these additions these days. So tied to that, we are creating this seminar that we're hosting on the 20th with the planning department and the historic preservation ordinance officers at the fire station. This is a Tuesday. We're going to start at 1 o'clock. We'll see how it lasts. And they are going to be able to come and answer specific questions designed for the realtor community. You know, what's the process? How can we make it easier? There are many things since the revision of the ordinance that are easier. We have all these Paul Gomberg houses built in the 80s and 90s. It used to be very cumbersome to go make changes. Those are non-contributing structures. It ought to be relatively easy to go down there and change a door. It shouldn't take 2 months of drawings and a meeting and going to the historic office and going to the historic meeting. You can now replace the door with an acceptable door and you get an administrative approval within a day. If you want to take off the vinyl siding, we just did it at 723 Heiser, see what's there and start immediately replacing with what's there. You can get that approved in 1 day. You don't have to go down and submit the drawings like we used to. So we did create a mechanism to speed up approvals that should be relatively easy, non-contributing structures, that sort of thing. But if you're just taking a structure and you're doing some big addition or some modification, you know, certainly it's the old process of making the application. The openings and the original structure, I mean, it's next to impossible to modify that sort of thing. So if you have 2 doors and a duplex and you want to go to 1 door, you're going to be denied. You're not going to be able to do that. I mean, it's clear that you're not going to be able to do that sort of thing. You want to move a window 2 feet because you're rearranging the rooms and the kitchen wants to be just a little bit further. I mean, it's really not easy. They have denied about 99% of those. They've gotten 1 example since last October where they granted that moving the window, but they do not want an original opening modified. And then clearly, the next biggest thing is they want a delineation of what is the old and the new. I know it makes perfect sense if you're doing a modest addition, you have a 2-1 bungalow and you're just adding out at the back another master bedroom and den. They want to clearly identify what is the old house and what is the addition. Now, how you clearly identify it can be, you know, what they used to really want. If this is 117 siding, they wanted white or hardy plank on the addition, so you could clearly see the difference. We have gotten them to agree that there are other ways. Maybe you could inset or reset the addition 8 inches or 1 foot or something. I mean, that could clearly identify it. You could just put a little piece of trim. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want an addition to have a different type of siding. I wouldn't want, if I had wooden siding, I wouldn't want the addition to be stucco. They really do, but they'll generally yield but the delineation between what is old and what is new, so that 100 years from now, you could certainly remove the addition and see clearly what was the original house. And we always kind of talked about that, but they got around it the first 6 years of the ordinance. We're not going to get by that anymore. So the 2 biggest changes, I think, are starting at 100%, doesn't allow kind of the camelback, and that delineation. Then the next biggest thing, of course, for new construction is certainly the size. Their intention is to keep them smaller and more compact. The historic office for the new construction would rather it be on a slab, not up 24 inches, and it would rather it have 9-foot ceilings on the first floor and no more than 8-foot ceilings on the second floor. That's what they'd like, because that keeps the scale. They don't, because it's not a historic structure, they're not trying to replicate intentionally. They're not trying to let you build a house that looks like a house from 100 years ago. They don't want that. They want you to be able to drive down a neighborhood and see the new house and the old house and see the difference. That's the historic perspective from which they come from. So, of course, I don't necessarily want that from the neighborhood. I want them to fit in or whatever. And luckily for the Heights Most of them are deed restricted, that we don't allow these slabs, or we don't allow at least things less than 24 inches on the properties that have been deed restriction. Although we have had some slabs, especially by, lower than White Oak, that the slabs have been 24 inches to meet the deed restriction, but to keep the ceiling height lower so that they didn't have to have all the steps from the trusses on the first floor. So this meeting is, I'll introduce the people, I suppose, but it's really designed for interaction. And so if you have questions or things you specifically want covered, and we made sure to include, like I say, Coldwell, but Greenwood King, Martha Turner, John Daugherty, Bernstein, Beth Wolf, Heritage. We made sure that they were going to be sure to send a large number of their realtors. We didn't want it to just be a little thing. The Heights realtors generally know about historic district or know who to ask about it. It's the realtors that come from Katy or come from somewhere else that don't have any concept of what you can do or not do in these historic districts or whatever. So we thought, while you would still have input, because the design guideline process is there are these meetings that are ongoing about once a month, and so you and your clients will have input. The way the design guidelines are going to work is much the same way the planning commission works. They're going to propose a few things, and they're going to see the level of opposition. And if there's no opposition, so follow my thinking here, if 10% of the people, there's about 30 people who are really active in historic preservation, who go to every meeting, who go to everything, who bitch every time something comes up. Those 30 people, there are 1,500 people in the historic district, those 30 people put out something and there's no opposition, it is going to be in the design guideline, and that's going to dictate. So you'll have the large ordinance, but the design guideline could say no house greater than, no property greater than 50% of the original structure. Theoretically, the design guideline could say that. So if you have 1,000 square foot bungalow, the largest addition you'd be able to do is 500 square feet. That's the type of thing that's going to go into the design guideline. We're going to have a lot of input, Tony's, but we have to be vocal and we have to say, at the moment, if I have a house and it has 9/1 windows, when there is an addition, they want the addition to have a different window, okay? They're historians. I get who they are, but it seems stupid to me that I've got this house that has all these divisions of the windows and then over 1, and then my addition can only be 1/1. No divisions whatsoever. Because clearly they want the new section not to look like the old section. I say, if I give you the delineation that you wanted, surely you can give me the same window pattern on an addition that's in an existing house. Why would I not want the same windows if I want that? We're talking about an addition that's I'm not going to be able to modify the old one. And let's be clear too, you will not be able to change another window. Where we used to change windows in the last ordinance, it was about 50-50. If we bitched enough and you got enough stuff, you were able to replace a window. You are not going to be able to replace an old window, except with an old window. You're not going to be able to replace them anymore. That is the historic element they're trying to preserve. They're trying to save that siding. They're trying to save everything that they can, they want to save. So they don't want any material not reused. So changing out the windows at the front of the house when you do your addition, it's not going to pass the HAHC unless the whole ordinance is modified to some degree, which I don't see that happening in the near future. So they're able to answer those questions. I want it to be a dialogue. It's not a bitch session. It's an interaction of clarity. And then, like I say, input from realtors and input from the clients as the design guidelines come through. When we kick out some of these drafts, which will not kick out, we've intentionally modified the calendar so I can't handle it at Christmas time. People are too busy. So some of these first drafts will come out in the middle of January, and we'll have another public meeting about it in February, then do a mail out to everyone. They'll look for the level of opposition, both you can go online and you can comment, but when we've had them before, the 30 people sent 500 comments of the same thing. It's only 30 people if you really count them. And those people and their comments have trumped everyone else. And you're going to have a larger amount of input, or you're going to be very surprised how not only did the ordinance modify, but the design guidelines is going to be the more restrictive of the situation. And you'll get design guidelines in Woodland Heights. You're going to get them everywhere, and might get them at the same time. There's some common elements like not being able to replace a window, that would be in all the design guidelines that they're going to use. But I mean, specifically the summit, and like I say, you'll have, but if you're going to get how the block face is working, you can ignore another house in the historic district. Doesn't make any difference. So if I'm doing a house in the 1400 block of Harvard, and I say there's one like it in the 1500 block of Harvard, they don't care. They only care about that block face, what's going on that street, on that side of the street. So if you're in the 1500 block of Arlington on the west side, and there's a vacant lot, and there's 9 new construction houses and 1 bungalow, you can compare to the 1 bungalow on that block. That's all. You can't compare. So if there's only a bungalow left on that block face and you sell a lot that's vacant, you're not going to get a 2-story house in most likelihood. Not going to be able to get a brick house, even though there might be historic brick houses spread throughout the district, and they definitely don't compare to anything odd. In Woodland Heights, you cannot compare to my house, even though I think it's the most historic house. It was the original developer's house. It's the it's very historic. They will not, by ordinance, use that house as representative of the neighborhood because it's not representative. It wasn't another. You cannot compare to Bart Truxillo's house at 18th and Harvard. That's not what was typical in Heights East. So you can't use that as comparison. Can't use anything on Heights Boulevard to compare to an interior lot. And only use Heights Boulevard to compare to Heights Boulevard. That's the way the ordinance is written. If in the design guidelines, we modified that to some degree, which I think you need a broader context. In the historic districts like Freeland or Nor Hill, where there are 98% of the houses are original, it works just fine. There's really not a conflict. The conflict is in a district like the Heights, east, west, or south, when there's less than 51% of the houses are contributing to begin with, okay? So the basic person doesn't even know if it's contributing or not, and so 1303 Cortland, the Collada house or whatever, that's not a contributing structure. It's a beautiful house on the corner, but it's been modified so much you can't compare to it. You can't use it as a reference point. You can only use the little bungalow that's to the north of it. So it can be a little confusing for most people. Thus, we're having Realtor Day, Historic Preservation Day.
David?
Are they going to go back then and look at each of the properties as contributing and non-contributing?
They're not going to reevaluate. No. They have, in theory, done it, and they're not making any changes. Unless a homeowner really went after it somehow, because we do believe there's a fair number of misclassifications, but they've been very resistant to make any changes. We have only changed in the 6.5 years in the Heights 3 designations that we approved. And remember, the one that the Green Kings is on 1815 Cortland or whatever, that house came from where Chase Bank is in the 40s. They moved it. The historical context period is 1900 to 1925. So if you move a house from the 40s over there, but the Historic Commission and the Appeals Board denied their ability to demo that house. Now, those people went to City Council and there was a hearing and they were actually able to win at City Council or whatever. And they were able to, they moved that house back out of the district. Right now you can move a house, it just has to be in the district. So who's gonna buy a lot and then buy another lot in the historic district and move that house to the, that doesn't even make any sense. So, but during the process, the answer to your question is no, they're not reevaluating the classification of any properties.
So if it's a non-contributing house, can you modify it any way you want? Or tear it down?
You can certainly tear it down.
Historical contributing houses on the block?
You can still tear it down just fine. You can modify it with greater ease than ever before. I mean, the modification to the ordinance we're screaming at them to pick their battle. The battle is size, scale, and save the historic elements. Okay, that's their element. So if that's going to be their deal, then I say the same thing. The non-contributing structures make it easier to do some of these modifications, modify the porches, modify the doors, change the doors. That ought to be much easier, whatever. And the new construction ought, other than scale or size, that's where they're getting us. But if it's stucco or metal or brick, or if it has 16 panels over one, what does it really matter? It's a non-contributing structure. So, and I think they're yielding a little bit more. The office of the Historic Preservation Office is definitely yielding. The commission's been a little reluctant, but remember there's a new mayor they report to. So I think over time, that's going to be much easier. So yeah, I think what I'm saying is, yeah, they're picking their battle, and the battle is save the historic elements, start at 100%, scale and size. That's kind of what I think you're going to see throughout the deal.
Starting at 100% remains.
If this house was original and the original little part was right there, you could not start the second floor addition at 50% like we used to. You must start, you can do a 2-story addition, it just has to start at 100% of what was original. So if they had done some porch enclosure, you could probably take off the porch enclosure or start over that. But generally, so, I mean, but how much room do you have left? In Northern Woodland Heights, you don't have any room at all. I mean, you're hardly going to get anything but a 10-foot addition on those sort of things. On the 55-132 lot, you can probably do a second-story addition, but you know, you're not going to be where we used to take the downstairs, rearrange it, put the master down, and go put 3 bedrooms and a game room or something upstairs. There's not enough room to do that anymore. So what they force you to do is put the master up. Well, now we've got kids downstairs and the master up. That defeats half the purpose of what people want. They don't want that house, right? They don't care about money, property value, economic impact. They're not allowed to consider the economic impact of any of these decisions. They're only preservationists of historic elements. That's what they consider. So if the new house diminishes the value of the house next door, which they feel like if it looms over it, that's what diminishes the value. But we've gotten in broad acres, you've gotten modern houses approved. It can be a product of its own time. They do not want you to build a replica of what was there. I mean, they want you to be able to differentiate between the two.
So Bill, if I've got a client that wants to buy a contributing structure inside the historic district, and they want to take 1,000 square foot house and make it 1,700 or 1,800 by building onto the back of it, and then maybe the kitchen's on the back, but they want to either expand it or move it back to the back still.
No problem.
And then it has a front porch that say was redone at some point and it wasn't really the original, and it's on the ground level, and you step up to the front door. Can they turn that front porch into more of a typical front porch?
The porches, so what was on the Sanborn map in 1920 is what you can do. So if there used to be a porch and they tore it off in the 50s, we have the little stoop with the iron and the concrete. You want to tear that off and put back a porch. You can put back a porch, whatever was there originally. They would look back on the Sanborn maps, look at the footprint of the porch width, and you could go back to that. But if the porch is currently 12 feet, and that's what it was originally, and you want to make the porch 16 feet, the answer is no. Front of the house, no. You can put back what was original, put back the original width, tear off something that's non-contributing. The addition to the back, if you start at 100% and you want a modest addition, there really is no problem with that. I mean, it's relatively easy. It's what they want. I'm not trying to stop that. It's the 1,000 square foot bungalow with a 3,000 square foot addition. It's next to impossible.
In the kitchen, making it bigger.
Make the kitchen bigger is no problem at all.
Okay.
The biggest issue with that is, you know, living room, dining room, kitchen, and you want to change one of these windows, you know, now we're going to modify it a little bit. You're going to move this wall over. The dining room got larger. The windows aren't centered, and you just want to take the original windows and you just want to move them over and center them into your new room. No, sorry. No, it makes common sense. They don't want that. They want you to have the ability to move back the house the way it was, and they want those windows to stay where they were. So it's moving the opening of the front house. If it's this window and you really want to take this window and you can't see it from the street, there's not that big a deal with that, honestly. You could get rid of the window, you could move the window. They don't care so much about the back house. They care about the 3 sides that people can see from some point from the middle of the street. Good question.
What about adding on at 100%, adding on to the side, like going out over what is the driveway now?
If you start 100% and you want to go to the right or the left side, no problem. No problem. They do not really want you to be too close to your neighbor. So even the deed restriction, which is typically 3 feet, they want you to stay at 5 feet. Would they ever yield they might. So it's certainly not a problem. Even for this deal right here, I could start right here, which is the back stuff, and I want to do a little addition, and I want to go off to the side. It's no problem. They just don't want you to be at 3 feet, and they don't want it to be significantly higher. They really want it to be lower, so it looks like an addition. So if you have this 10-foot ceiling, they really want your little addition to have 9-foot ceiling, so you can clearly identify the Lego blocks that you could remove it later and didn't modify the deal.
When you were saying that you wish that they would agree with some other thing, I mean, you're talking about delineation, you're talking about a piece of trim, or, I mean, I can think you could do a plaque, this was added in 19.
Yeah, they don't like that. Yeah.
At the side where nobody can see it, but that's color. What they're talking, you're suggesting is some like with trim.
Trim piece. Yeah, and then if you had wood 117 siding and you took your 1,000 square foot bungalow, you added 700 square feet and you wanted to add 117, before they want you to change it to 8-inch hardy. Because clearly that's the addition. And we say that's making my neighborhood ugly. We gotta find a way around that. And so they're saying, yeah, you can put a little piece of trim right there, and it clearly identifies. They would love on your addition though, instead of going straight back, they would love for you to kick over 1 foot or kick in 1 foot, and then it's clearly an addition. That's what they would prefer. Would they yield with the trim piece? They would. Can't really see it from here. They yield on that. These are great questions.
So even if no one would ever go back and tear off a structure to go back to the original, that they don't care about that.
They don't care. They're not allowed to use any economic impact. They still think that someone might, but yes, they're not allowed to think. They can't consider the economic impact one way or the other.
I don't even think it's economic. It's just totally, I mean, the livability of the property. No one's ever going to take an 1,800 square foot house that you
Micro houses would be very popular in 2116. No, yeah, they're not allowed to consider it. So yeah, they don't consider it. They want to be able, and so I mean, an example of extremism, but I mean it's there. So in Freedmanstown, we basically have, that is the section by Gillette, where Allen Parkway's, been expanded there, whatever, that little section between West Gray and basically Buffalo Bayou. There's a section there. It's really one of the more historic elements. 90% of the houses are gone. I mean, they've been gone. We've got about 40 houses left from the 1850s to the 1870s. The true master plan that they're working with UNESCO World Heritage Site is to take back that area. And over 100 years, every new house that's been built in the last 20 years would be removed. Every townhouse would be gone. And you would only be able to identify the original. They would never replace it. You can't, in their world, you can't even build a replica. That doesn't do any good. They would just outline the original structure that was there in 1870. They have a plan. It's a $500 million plan that it takes. But I mean, that's what they want to do. Stop any new construction. And all the new construction that's been built over the last 30 years eventually would be purchased and demolished, and you would just have a walking footprint. That historic district is predominantly about the street and not about the structures, but you wouldn't add back any structures. You would just outline the archaeological site of what was there.
How did these 30 people get such power to
They bitch a lot. They are very proactive at bitching.
So is there another faction that could become the bitchers of the bitchers?
Well, we would hope so.
When
I was the bitcher of the bitchers, then I was pigeonholed as the rabid developer, the profiteer, it got to be one of those things. It's got to be someone other than the realtor, or the realtor who is the greedy profiteer of brand new construction. It's got to be a consumer. But I'll be honest with you, I've been battling this 6 years. We have this mindset. A, people like this historic district because it stops the mega mansion from being built beside them. And B, the people who are in their mega mansion, they got theirs already. So they don't want any competition. They think their house is going to be worth a hell of a lot more because you're not going to get any more mansions south of 20th Street. So it's hard to get a level of opposition, and nobody really wants to bitch about the Historic Commission until they make application. And they hate it. The 75% of the people that have gone through the process despise it. But there's not enough of those people at any one point. And once they go through it and they've got theirs, they've got theirs. So you'd be surprised how hard it is to even get today. Here's the fact. if you made application, you could not get 67% support. You couldn't get there. But at the same time, I can't get 67% of the people that want out. I can only get about 20% of the people that want out. So I can't find enough. I mean, we've done studies, we've hired people, we've gone door to door. The people only want out when it impacts them. And they're fearful that you're gonna demolish every house and replace it with a big stucco McMansion. And their trade-off is, I'll let you go through hell because I'm not gonna go through hell.
Bill, how many people on that planning committee are architects?
Of the people that are there, they do have 2 of those people are architects by trade. Of the people that are the most, there are some other land people. You would know the people if I mention them, but I won't mention them. But
Is this the historic district, planning or the planning commission?
You were acting the people who were the biggest complainers, or just on the planning commission?
On the planning commission.
I'm sorry, let's start back over. I didn't answer your question right. I thought you were talking about the people who were Tom's 30 people who create the most controversy. On the historic commission, there are designated deals. There is a contractor generally supported by the Greater Houston Builders Association. There is one architect. There is one appraiser. There's one person who lives in a historic house. By ordinance, it's dictated. There are only about 3 people who are just citizen appointees, but there is an architect on the Historic Commission. In the Planning Commission, same thing. They're designated, so there are so many engineers, there are so many architects, there's so many. I am the citizen representative. I just represent neighborhoods on the Planning Commission. I don't represent any, but many of those people are engineers, or they are builders, or they are developers, or some of those deals. But so there's the 2 different groups do have representation from architects. One architect.
Well, there's 2 houses on Euclid that have to add on to 100%, they did that in the past,
Mhm.
they have towers.
Mhm.
They're awkward.
Yeah.
Their camelbacks are more conforming, but others are very awkward.
Not gonna get the same camelback that we used to, especially on the 50 by 132 lots. Just not gonna get them. These are great questions.
Is this in your repertoire? What's the deal with, this is a little off topic, but what's the deal with some restaurants you can have dogs outside and some you can't? Where does
We're modifying that deal to be more dog friendly. I mean, in general, the health department, which regulated that, not the planning department, has been instructed to be more friendly towards animals. And so the city initiative is to make it equitable. And if the individual restaurants don't want to do dogs, that's truly their decision. If they say the city doesn't allow it, they're lying to you, because the city does allow it. But it is regulated by the health department.
regulated, not certain dogs?
No,
Dogs.
what regulations would come from the health department, but there are very few regulations about it.
So
They're
if
using
they
it as
say
an
the city
excuse.
won't let us-
That's not a true statement. It's just not. I hear every day the city does that. I'm going, I am
Yeah, figure
not
out
part
why.
of the city. The answer is no, that's not true. But same, I hear it on the Heights Association is against this, and so I think I would know if the Heights Association was against it.
You know, kind of on Ray Lynn's topic as well, and this is a specific 8 Road Flint is using the parking lot of the post office as their overflow.
Mhm.
When those new buildings are built, there's new parking, and those people from 8 Road Flint now will be moved back. What does the ordinance say with regards to parking for the business? Because there's always that overflow that goes back in the neighborhood, which then people complain about.
I will be honest with you, you probably won't like the answer, but we are certainly in the business of granting variances and having fewer parking spaces. Study after study after study is showing that it makes it more walkable, which in turn will reduce the amount of traffic. And with the onslaught of Uber and technology like Lyft and stuff, I mean, so they got a variance without that parking from the post office, honestly. They got a variance. And so long as they didn't do an addition, their variance stays in place. Now, they added on, they'd have to go back for another addition. But, you know, Coldwell has 0 parking. They got a variance for that. And we granted a variance for what will be the restaurant at Yale and 21st. We granted a variance to what will be Bernie's burger barn over there at 22nd and
With
Yale.
no parking whatsoever?
No, they have parking in the back. No, not no parking. Only instance of no parking is truly Coldwell.
And do they realize that we have 98 degrees and 100% humidity with our walkability city?
We do recognize that. We have those little fans tied to our iPhone. I think the neighbors, it's a valid complaint. I just got back from Buenos Aires and Santiago and Mexico City, and I've been to Paris and London, and they have very, and I know it's a different climate, I know it's a different mindset, but if we want to be more pedestrian friendly, we want to encourage that. So Nashville, I was just in Nashville again last week. Many of their restaurants have zero parking, and people were just fine, and they're in historic neighborhoods, and they're thriving little places, and those neighborhoods are thriving. We're not accustomed to it, and we're not accustomed to a car parking in front of 14th and Harvard and walking to a restaurant on Heights Boulevard, but we're going to have to get used to it, I think. If we want to save the buildings, many of those buildings are older. I mean, the only way it would qualify is if you tore off half the building for the parking lot. And so what we are doing,
Just have no restaurant there.
you could have no restaurant there.
They can go into places where there's parking. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
But all these places are slammed. They're all busy,
Yeah.
they're all
I
making.
think
They're all
gonna
slammed because they're all there. People are parking in all the neighborhoods. And when you get all those people that park in all the neighborhoods in front of your house, you and I, luckily enough, don't have that issue because we don't have a restaurant in our neighborhood, which means we don't have a walkability factor to our neighborhood. But at the same time, we don't have people peeing in our front yards at 2:00 in the morning.
Well, that's illegal.
Illegal or not, it's still gonna be done.
Still happening. But I
I-
think that's one of the biggest things I have as a request for people buying a house is walkability. If they're buying high.
It is.
walkability.
It is, and they want that coffee shop, and they want that's going to play music at 10 o'clock at night. They're going to be over there with friends playing their little guitar over there, and you're going to have the restaurants. And I mean, I think it's the evolution of what is basically an inner city neighborhood. It's going to. I go to study after study. We can make the master plan community out there and the business park over here, and it forces you to get in the car and drive to your school and drive to your work and drive to your park. And I'm just going, that model may have worked in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. Now you're going to get a hike and bike trail, which is going to be traffic and people peeing, and it's going to be people running down the boulevard at 1 in the morning, and you probably ought to get used to it because it's coming. And I think the cities does grant those variances, and I'll continue to see it. We have in Montrose is probably the biggest area where we are undergoing a whole new parking ordinance change there. And I serve on a special committee looking to address the pedestrian friendly in residential neighborhoods, because it's not a valid complaint. Right now, your valet rule is about 500 feet. So if for the glass walls to work, or for 8 row Flint to have that valet and park, you have to be within 500 feet. It's just kind of an odd rule that it's 500 feet. Why is it not 501 or 498? I don't know. So we're making it easier where there are vacancies. So you can take Montrose is probably in Westheimer, or Lower Westheimer is probably the greatest example. If you're underbelly and you can only park at half price books, why can't I park at the Mattress Firm factory 50 feet over, especially at night? What does it matter? So we have intentionally made it easier in that area for you to get a variance. If you can work in the next 500 feet, it's automatically granted these days. So we waived the 500-foot rule for Montrose in that section of Lower Westheimer from about Dunleavy all the way to Bagby to make it easier for the restaurants to be able to, and the restaurants with not as much parking lot, because we don't want Chili's to come in and tear down something and put a restaurant with 300 parking spots. It doesn't really work as well as you would think. The bigger the parking lot encourages more people, and if you have fewer parking spaces, you do encourage pedestrian friendly and the bicycles and people that drop off and the people that carpool. So I will take another prime example is one-way streets. We basically are going to be of the mindset to eliminate all one-way streets. One-way streets cause people to drive fast, which means they don't slow down, which means they don't stop at the cafe. When you take 4 lanes and you reduce the size to 3 lanes and you put bicycle pathways on the either way, the traffic goes slower. It's safer. Not one less mile per hour are you reducing the speed above what was already permitted. So if we have 25-mile-per-hour on Bagby, if I change that deal, so Washington's prime example, we would like to reduce the size of Washington's car footprint to 3 lanes versus 4, widen the sidewalk by 10 feet on both sides, encourage cafes and things through there, and study after study after study has shown that we will increase the traffic and not slow down the speed. And you're going to see that. You're going to see the one-way streets go away at Brazos and Bagby and Midtown. And you're going to see two-way traffic because it's safer for the people of the city of Houston. It's safer for the people walking. It's safer for the people biking. And it's safer for the cars. We had 600 car accidents in the city of Houston last year where people died in a car driving in what was a speed limit that was supposed to be less than 30 miles per hour. They died because they're going too fast and they hit something. If we can reduce this traffic speed by 5 or 10 miles per hour, and two-way traffic does that, moving the buildings close to the street causes people to pay more attention, and they will drive slower and drive more consciously. It's study after study proves it. So you're going to see more and more of that, I think.
And it might increase more cafe type.
That's what it is. It's designed to increase more pedestrian-friendly businesses that can survive in our 100-degree heat and humidity. Okay.
Bill, how hard is it to get speed bumps put in for
The process for application has been modified and it's easy. So the process is easier than ever.
Mhm.
Who's going to pay for the speed bumps? The city isn't going to pay for the speed bumps. The city will pay for the cushions, which are the temporary deals that are actually even being put up in Woodland Heights. We're having a series of cushions that are going to go up, and they're going to go. They'll do a traffic study. It's easier. Do a traffic study. If it warrants it, they'll put up the cushions. We'll put the cushions up for 3 months. During the 3-month period, they'll do another study to see how the traffic impact has been. And then if that HOA theoretically wants it, they're going to have to pay for it. The city's not going to pay for the speed bumps that are more permanent. They will try the cushions and see how that works out, and then the HOA is going to have to pay for it. So even in Woodland Heights, you're talking about $40,000 to $50,000.
How many passes?
speed bumps?
How many are they going to put up in their addition? It's a lot. I mean, you're talking about probably 20 new cushions, and I'm not a fan of it. I voted against it. I think it's a waste of money. I don't think it's going to do what it is that they want to do. But even where I live at Balin and Morrison, they are going to add basically a circle in the middle of the street that's designed to slow down the traffic. So that you will come to Balin and Morrison where there's no stop sign, and you will be forced to go around what is basically a round dining room table thing. Could be a planter, but that's what it is. It's designed to slow down the traffic to see how it works. So a roundabout. 2 roundabouts are going on Balin. The speed cushions are going on, a lot of other streets.
Because you're like a temporary black.
That's what that is. Yeah. So it's easier. They made it intentionally easier.
I mean, I just think that where there is a school, whether it be private or whatever, the speed, I mean, like I could just tell a police officer, say, hey, sit in our driveway. Because people drive 40, 45, 50 miles between 14th and 15th. And there's a daycare. I mean, little bitty kids. And I mean, I just think
You'd be surprised how many people hate speed bumps. They hate them. But if there's support, I mean, and
so it's the community, so it's the HOA?
The HOA has to agree to it. There has to be an entity that agrees, and the funding has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
So, and if that group, if that block wants them, even in the, it would be fine. I mean, you could get it, so long as someone's paying for it, it can be done just fine.
A lot of money, Bill.
It's all money.
What about curbs and gutters? Our block, 2 blocks of Vine Street missed it, got voted
Yeah.
down. Is there any hope for it?
I think that there is hope. I think that curbs and gutters, there's not enough money in the city budget to go and do a curb and gutter project. There is money in the budget to address drainage and tie it to curbs and gutters. So here's what the Parker administration did: a horrible job of explaining Rebuild Houston, which I think is a valuable thing. We used to have this, $10 billion, and we made the minimum payment on our credit card every year, and we never paid any principal. And then we refinanced all the time, and we never paid down any of the debt. So the street debt continued to increase. So we refinanced the bonds from 1968's roads, and we're still paying for them today. Truly, what happened with Rebuild Houston is they stopped it. We're not doing that anymore. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to pay dollar for dollar for what it costs. And in the interim, not going to be enough money to fix the roads. For 5 years, there's not going to be enough money to fix roads. But then when we fix the roads, we're not mortgaging them for 40 years anymore. We're going to pay as we go. And we're 6 years into it, and we have enough money now to do a fair amount of roads. And every year, we have more and more money to go deal with the roads. So the curbs and gutters are going to be dealt with in the drainage. The mayor appointed a flood czar to deal with flooding tied to all streets must address flooding when they're redone, and all curbs and gutters are to be done in the same manner. So through the CIP funds, which are the capital improvement projects designed per council district, is how you're really going to get those. So you need to make applications. We're still about 5 years out. If you've got support and approval today, we've been 15 years out. We're about 5 years out to go back and be able to do those if they're not already on a schedule tied to Rebuild Houston. So it's going to get easier.
Well, on the 1400 block of Coldwell, and the 1400 and the 1500 don't have them, but everybody else on Coldwell.
Because you didn't get 75% support when you were there. Then you'd be surprised. I was president of the Heights Association during that process, and you would be surprised, 500 people complained about curbs and gutters. And I want curbs and gutters, but just representing the city, the people don't. They think it kills birds and butterflies and squirrels. They feel like it's better drainage in the ditch than it is with more concrete. They think it looks like West U. They think it encourages more people to park in front of their house. You'd be surprised the overwhelming number of people who hate curbs and gutters in the Heights. They want to keep it funky. So it's harder to get. I was at the glass wall. I said, can you believe these nutcases that don't like curbs and gutters? And I had to go apologize to hundreds of people and write letters and go beg for forgiveness on their front porch because I thought everyone wanted curbs and gutters, and clearly they do not want curbs and gutters. Yes, they did. There was not I was backtracking for all that. So if there's a level of support, I think there's a pretty good mechanism in. You still, to speed up the process, you need to get 75%, or we are still doing, and we're doing projects on 16. You can go into rebuildhouston.com and you can see the construction timeline for most streets today. You were right. Yeah, I know. I think people felt that way. There wasn't truly enough money the previous 5 or 6 years, but I think there's more money today for curbs and gutters, and there's definitely a process for it to speed it up. Anything about parks or green space or parks? No, we'll go about that. You're gonna get a bond election, a pretty significant bond election in October of 2017. You're gonna have an announcement relatively soon about pension reform. The mayor had his budget approved. We reduced spending by about $90 million this fiscal year over last year. They used oil at $19 a barrel to budget. For this budget cycle, which started July 1. But I think what you're going to see, he got that budget approved unanimously and a month ahead of schedule, a month sooner than they'd gotten them approved the previous 12 years, in an effort to prove that they were fiscally responsible so that they could come back. You're going to have pension reform announcement very soon. Which has also been bleeding. Every year, we're obligated to pay in $100 million. Every year, we pay in $65 million. So every year, they assume there's going to be an 8% return on their retirement, and every year there's a 2% return. So we get further in the hole every year in this pension mess. I mean, and it's going to cost, we're $10 billion behind of what we did not fund for the past 20 years. And we owe that money to those policemen, firemen, and municipal workers, and I think they're going to honor that pledge. What they have is unsustainable. I cannot promise you you're going to get 8% in your 401k. I can't promise you that, and that's their promise. So we're going to have to take all the new hires and say, look, the return is what the return is. That's how it is for the rest of us who work at ExxonMobil or Shell or something. And that'll be the first step. There's going to be concessions for people going in. We're going to have to pay back that money over time. We'll end up with some bond election to cover that over the next 30 years. We'll be paying for 20 years we didn't pay. But I think pension reform will then be tied to the revenue cap, which will probably be the biggest battle that we've had. Where there are TERSs, and there are 30 of these TERSs out there. The drainage ditch of White Oak Bayou is in a TERS, and of course all the area you see around Buffalo Bayou and those apartments, where there's nice street lights and curbs and gutters and brick fences, they're in a TERS, because the TERS is not bound by revenue cap. So the revenue cap sets in, and if the house value is at $200,000 and it's tied to population and inflation, and the value goes up to $250,000, the city doesn't necessarily make the same amount of money as it would if it collected the same tax rate on $250,000. We have to reduce the tax rate and not get any more. So we're tied to this inflation, which is growing at about 2 or 3%, but the population is growing at 10%. And so every year, the city has more people and less money to deal with. We have less per capita to spend on policemen and firemen, except in the TERSs. They have enough money because they're collecting their money. And so what the mayor did is said, if the city is growing at 3%, then I want 3% of the TERS money to go back into the general fund. And that's what he did this year to help balance the budget. So we pulled money, because it wasn't fair to have that little pocket with great street lights and all the money in the world, and crime to be 2 blocks over, and the people who are not in the TERS are having to pay more for policemen and firemen. So now there's an equitable approach of collecting the money. But the revenue cap will be the biggest issue in 2017. Going to the voters and say, please remove the revenue cap. We're the largest city in the world with the revenue cap. We're the only city in the state of Texas with a revenue cap. The county doesn't have a revenue cap, and the school district doesn't have a revenue cap. Why are we self-imposing this revenue cap, which says the city can't collect enough money to pay for what the citizens want, policemen and firemen, public safety, and parks and things. So the revenue cap, if you can get pension reform done, the revenue cap will be on in October 17th, and a significant bond election. What the mayor wants to do is not do incremental little things. He wants to do transformative things. If we're gonna fix things, let's fix them right, not just a little bit. Let's don't put any more Band-Aids on things. And so those will be the 2017 political agenda.
I only know one iota about this, but it does. Is there still talk about the city of Houston getting the fire department pension?
Yes, there is. We talk every day about it. Yes, there is. So the firemen have not wanted to play well with one another. They did not meet with the Parker administration. They would not agree to sit into a meeting. So you're going to have no reform during the Parker administration. The current mayor has a better relationship with the firemen, and I think the firemen are willing to negotiate some, but I don't think they want necessarily exactly what the mayor's proposed, but they are meeting, they are negotiating more. It is very odd. If you write a paragraph about pension reform and you put the policemen before the firemen are upset about it. No matter, someone's got to go first, right? So when the mayor met with the policemen first, the firemen were upset. He was meeting with the 3 groups, the municipal workers, the firemen, and the policemen. So there is movement on behalf of the firemen. There will be some announcement. If the firemen just did not agree, the mayor's plan is to go to the members of the legislature of all of Houston, both Republicans and Democrats, which he's been meeting with since before inauguration, and agree that it's going to bankrupt the city. The city will have to declare bankruptcy without a change. And I think you would see the legislature, who has the final say, would make the change anyway. What the legislature wants is for everyone to be in agreement and then go to the legislature and they'll adopt what's in agreement. So that's the current plan. Try and get an agreement between the 3 groups. There's basically pretty good agreement with the municipal workers and the policemen today. And there are ongoing discussions, which I had one with the mayor yesterday about it. This is his time that he wants to resolve the pension issues this week, first of next week, make the announcement to people. So that's going to happen. Public art. Here, this is interesting about, and I don't want to take up more of your time, but you have to go or something. So the city is in the public art business. So when we take sales tax revenues that comes in, whether you go to a hotel or you eat at Coldwell, The city portion that comes in is designated for, by state law, it goes to certain things. It goes to the Houston Sports Authority, which pays off the debt of the stadiums. It goes to Houston First, which coordinates the George R. Brown and the tourism mechanism. And a certain portion goes to the Houston Arts Alliance, which is the mechanism that the city uses to spread the wealth of art. So we, the city, deals with art as a city two ways: through grants and distribution of the Houston Arts Alliance, or when there's a capital improvement project, a George R. Brown, we designate 1% of the total cost for public art. We build a new fire station, you build a new courthouse, you build the permitting office, 1% of that deal gets $40 million. Well, then $4 million of it went over there and was spent in public art. So that's why you have all this, George R. Brown and that whole project is probably $250 million. So you're talking about $25 million worth of public art. So I did an analysis for the mayor of the public art. Where is the public art? It is at the airport systems, George Bush and Hobby. That's where we spent money. And it's downtown at Discovery Green, George R. Brown, maybe a little at Herman Park. That's where the cities, we haven't built anything. We haven't built any courthouses or fire stations in a long time. We're trying to spread the wealth and say, all right, we'd like to increase the funding to 2%, see how that happens, or 1.75, any increase of the capital improvement deal. Take the money in all capital improvements. When I spend money down Heights Boulevard, let me spend that money on streets, which is not a building. Streets are currently exempted. And let me use that money in that region of area to get city's public art spread throughout the city, throughout the whole city. And the Houston Art Alliance, same thing. Quit spending money at Discovery Green and Herman Park and downtown and spend some of the money in Sunnyside and in Brooksmith and in Denver Harbor and in some of these areas where people have limited access to public art. And that is the mission of the administration, is to spread the wealth. The mayor's main objective is to not have a city of have and have nots. You cannot, I take the city and I'm at downtown at City Hall and I go 8 miles to the west and the value of dirt is $100 a foot in Memorial. I come over here to the Heights and I say that it's at $80 a foot. And I click over a little bit and it's $60 a foot in Brooksmith. If I took that same 8 miles and I cross over 45, I go down to about $30 a foot. And if I cross to 59, the value of dirt on the tax record is $2 a foot. Same 8 miles, $2 a foot, $100 a foot. The city, if you're in the revenue generating business, is not going to be able to take $100 dirt and make it worth $200. There's nothing they can really do. It'll go up. That's River Oaks and Memorial. They're just going to go up. If I take $2 dirt and I make it go to be worth $4 or $6 or $8 or $10, which is really not that hard to do. I create some policemen over there, put a park over there, put a grocery store over there. Even if the city has to fund it, I can 500 times the amount of revenue that the city gets. Plus, it would make affordable housing. I can deal with affordable housing. How many of you want to go live in Denver Harbor? I can sell you a house for $30,000 in Denver Harbor today. It's the same bungalow we used to sell for $100,000 a year in '95. Now, I can't get anybody to go over there. I need 500 people to go over there and do it. Maybe y'all will fill together with your Citizens Patrol. But if the city would intentionally go over there, we have an affordable housing problem. Let's let the city buy them, fix them up, sell them back to the people who make $52,000 or less or whatever, make them pay it back at a fair exchange rate or whatever. We could address affordable housing. We can deal with gentrification by not enforce minimum lot size and don't allow them to tear down the whole neighborhoods, and then go over there and increase the public safety and public health and the park system. So we intentionally have a plan to go and do that. I mean, the private sector is going to have to do the majority of it, but the city has a vested interest in improving that area. The mayor's first appointment was an education czar. We have zero to do in education in the city of Houston, except when neighborhoods are declining and people are moving out because they don't like the schools. We're losing billions of dollars in the city. So the city has to invest in a cooperative effort to increase the viability of these schools in underperforming neighborhoods. We have a financial vested interest in those neighborhoods. And so the mayor, by appointing education czars, is designed to go over there. What can we do? Is it public safety? Do we increase the level of policemen over there? Do we have, the city has a vested interest in improving those low-performing schools and low-performing neighborhoods, high-opportunity neighborhoods.
Would you use Power Alliance if you wanted to?
Yes, you do, and they're great. Absolutely, you would. The grant process is going on right now. We can send you a link. And they do, art is dance. It is an evening at a park. It is chalk on a sidewalk. It is not, it doesn't have to be a piece of sculpture or a piece of canvas. I mean, we do a lot of things along the hike and bike pathways and along, out into the neighborhoods that are tied to their culture. It can be African-American dances from the 1870s. It can be Hispanic mariachi bands. It can be puppet shows in Mandarin Chinese. Those are all art that the city promotes those things. And there's millions of dollars that are tied on through the Houston Art Alliance. Good question. Okay,
All right.
how was that?
That was great. Thank you, Bill.
You're
I
quite
do
welcome.
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I hope that you'll come. We'll send out some more information about this. We need a large, diversified group of realtors to come and participate in this thing on September 20th. If not, you are not going to like the end result of the design guidelines if we're not involved over there. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.